Listeners may know exactly the details of AI. We all know that it's a rapidly evolving technology and that it's going to play an absolutely key role in making sense of MDA data. So this morning we've got three experts to take us through how to incorporate AI in MDA and what are the benefits and what are some of the pitfalls for our organisations in using AI. First, I'll introduce the speakers as a batch rather than pop up and down three times. So our first speaker, thank you, is Gregg Casad. He's a former US Coast Guard officer of 20 years. He's currently the Monitoring, Control and Surveillance advisor to Skylight to enhance MDA, and of course Skylight was one of the original users of AI. Our next two speakers, as Simon indicated, will come in by video. Our first speaker by video is Sogol Ghattan, who's a director of a very fascinating company when you look at it, called Nautical Crime Investigation Services, based in Vancouver, Canada, that applies AI to maritime operations and maritime platforms for maritime crime investigations. Her background's in computer science and public policy. Our final speaker, Townsend, coming in via Brisbane, Australia, is the founder and director of a relatively new company called Pebbly that's focused on developing AI to help organisations adopt AI into their business operations. Jake has, before starting Pebbly Beach, he's had an extensive background in national security, working in many UN operations. So I think Jake is well placed to explain, not so much focused on maritime issues per se, but rather how small and medium enterprises can leverage AI, and of course some of those organisations may well be maritime fusion centres. So without further ado, Gregg, please come to the platform. Thank you.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. I want to start by thanking the organizers of the event, BIMRAD, and our colleagues from Australia for the opportunity to be here today to talk about Skylight. We've heard a little bit about Skylight. You've seen some of the screenshots during the presentations yesterday, but just to give a little bit of background on who we are. We're a nonprofit organization based within the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence. That institute was stood up by Paul Allen, one of the co-founders of Microsoft. And our intent is to provide maritime domain awareness and actionable intelligence for protection of their oceans. So how are we doing that? As was mentioned, I'm a retired Coast Guard guy. I was a law enforcement officer. I was an ocean governance and policy lead. I'm not an AI expert. However, our team does have some of the world's foremost AI developers that are working on using this data and taking big data and turning it into actionable information. We really focus on getting this to real time. How do we provide the tools for those who have to make decisions to send a vessel, to send an aircraft, and how are you going to provide that information to help you make those decisions about how you best leverage your resources? Now, not to bury the lead, this is made at no cost to our partners. That is not to say the program is free. There is a lot of resources that go into supporting this application, this program, and the team behind it, but we do provide it to our partners at no cost. So I'm in a room full of MDA experts. You all have seen this. You've seen the AIS tracks. You've seen the spaghetti of track lines on it and trying to figure out what is there of something of interest within all of those track lines. What Skylight looks to do is to look at the vessel behavior and identify those events that could be of interest to an analyst. Our events are based on two primary sources. The first being AIS, and the second being satellite-based imagery. And I'm going to talk through each one of these different types of events that our platform provides, but I'm going to do it really quickly because I think a lot of you have been using Skylight, so you know this, and I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how we do that. So the first event that tends to be draw a lot of attention is the ability to look at phishing events. And this is a tool where, based on an AIS track and the vessel's activity, the model will determine or make an estimate that that vessel was potentially engaged in phishing. Now, one of the things, as analysts we know, just because a vessel decides to do a track pattern that looks like trawling, doesn't mean that vessel was engaged in trawling. So when Skylight says it's a phishing event, that does not necessarily mean that that vessel was engaged in phishing. The activity was consistent with that. And then we, as professionals, have to then go and figure out, was that vessel engaged in phishing? And we do that through a variety of means. Could it be an inspection? Could be looking at other sources of information like vessel monitoring systems, logbooks, interviews, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of those tools we use. But Skylight can help you identify that whether or not that vessel may have been engaged in phishing activity. One of the other ones we do is looking at potential transshipment between two vessels. Now this is a rule-based event. And what we're trying to do is we're figuring out whether or not vessels came, and we're looking at it, again, this is AIS-based. Vessels that come within each other a certain distance for a certain period of time. Those vessels loiter near each other, and we're identifying that as the potential for a transshipment between those vessels. Subsequent to that is the identification of what we call dark rendezvous. This is an instance where a vessel's track line looks like it potentially engaged in a transshipment, but we do not see a second vessel. We do not see that other vessel, if there was one, was not broadcasting on AIS. But based on the one vessel's activity, we've said maybe. And if that happens to be in a high threat area for your organization, that might be something of interest that you want to go and investigate. In addition, and this is the one that I think a lot of people get excited about, is we're leveraging publicly available satellites. So the Sentinel, Constellation, Landsat, VIIRS, to be able to look at dark vessel detection. So we're using what we call computer vision to look at those satellite imagery and detect where there are vessels. And what we do in that process is, so if you've never seen it, here's an example of what a Sentinel-2 collection strip looks like. And what you can see on the screen there is these long strips. So you can think about like a beam coming out from the satellite. It only collects so much, right? Just like your camera can only see so much. It's the same way with these satellites. Well, those strips are anywhere from 100 to 300 kilometers by up to 500 kilometers long. Well, that's a huge chunk of ocean, right? I mean, can we all agree that's a huge chunk of ocean? So what we do is we then take that and we go through, we have developed the models to go and look for vessels within that large strip. You could recreate what Skylight does via brute strength, but you would need hundreds of people to do that. So you could go through and look through this strip and find this one little 40-meter vessel. You could do that, but Skylight can do that in a matter of minutes. And we do that and then we're looking for ability to correlate that vessel with AIS. So we'll look and see, was there a vessel transmitting on AIS? Can we say who that vessel was or who we think that vessel is? And if not, be able to then say, there was a vessel here that was detected, but we don't know who they are. Night lights, those of you, I mean, I think probably everybody here is familiar with VIIRS and the VIIRS satellites. Very powerful tool because most fishing vessels do have lots of deck lights on board. And so, you take a vessel that's broadcasting or has a lot of light on deck and you put it against a very dark background of the ocean. This satellite that was developed for looking for forest fires and flares on oil rigs picks up that light very, very well. It's been a very, very useful tool for places like the Philippines, where they have these vessels entering into some of their nearshore marine protected areas. We're also using synthetic aperture radar, which obviously I think that, again, this room knows this. You know, the benefit of SAR is it's weather independent. It doesn't matter. It's going to see through those clouds. If you're metal, if you're big enough that the radar beam is able to bounce off of it and get picked up, you're going to get seen. And so we're using those tools. That tool was already being used for Earth monitoring, right? So like this Sentinel suite of tools was already out there and has been for quite some time. What there wasn't was an ability to quickly take that information, process it, and find vessels within it. And we've done that, and what used to take a lot of time or weeks, we're now down into the periods of minutes of being able to, once that information gets to us. And the time, just for a quick point of reference, when we talk about the latency and what do we mean by near real time, a lot of times we'll talk about near real time with Skylight. We're talking about the ability to see things from a satellite imagery. It's going to take 4 to 6 hours to show up, and that's because there's just physics involved. The satellite has to go over a downlink station. It has to send it down to the ground. That information then has to be processed, and then the information is then uploaded into Skylight. So that's about as good as you're going to get. We do see some of the tools getting down into the 2-hour range, but our AIS events do show up as soon as that information is, or within minutes of that information being available with the AIS information being available. The next one, and this is where it's always everybody loves a good picture. So optical imagery is another tool that we're using from the Sentinel platform, from Landsat, and using those tools to identify vessels that are of interest. The resolution is not great, okay? These are freely available images that were really designed for monitoring like Earth-sense systems. So we're not going to be able to pick up some of the fine level detail that you would get if you ordered commercial imagery. However, what it does is it does allow you to see and identify that there are vessels in an area. And if that is an area of interest to your organization, then you know, do I send my boat north? I got one patrol boat today. Where are they going? They going north? They going south? They going west? Where do I put them? This can help you say, there are vessels up in this area. There are vessels over here. There's no one over there, so I'm not going to go over there, or at least there was no one there 4 hours ago. So one of the kind of neat tools, those of you who have been involved in the purchasing of commercial satellite imagery in the past, it used to be that if I wanted to collect commercial imagery, I had what we call the collection manager. It'd be an individual who was responsible for talking with that commercial provider. And I would say to them, hey, I've got a box. I want you to collect in this box. And they would then look at the satellites. Someone on their side, from the commercial vendor side, would say, oh, I've got a satellite going overhead. That satellite is available. We'll go ahead and collect for you. And then the information would then flow its way back to the customer. What we've been able to do in working with Maxar is we've automated that. So our users, our partners, say we have a box, we have an area of interest. If certain criteria are met within that area, then go ahead and try to collect high resolution imagery of it. And in these pictures here, you see a few of those examples of where vessels where the partner identified an area, and we were able to then collect that high resolution imagery from a commercial vendor. And that's a tool for those of you who are using Skylight in the room. If you have a threat, if you have an issue, and you think this tool could be useful to you, please reach out to us. And it's the email is support@skylight.global. But I also know a lot of you know my colleague Theo, who is the Skylight representative for this region, and I think a lot of you have his WhatsApp number. Some of you have grabbed my WhatsApp number. Reach out. We're a small team. We're happy to try to help out in figuring out whether or not that makes sense. So one of the cases that came up yesterday within our platform, we heard yesterday with a case where a vessel met a certain criteria, and then the analyst found that piece by kind of looking through all the data that came in. Within Skylight, you have the ability to create these areas of interest and then set up customized alerts. So you can say, if a vessel that's below this size from these flags enters into this box, I want to know. And it'll give you real-time notification that that vessel has entered into that area. So you have that capability to build out some of those. So as you know what your profile is, you're able to do it. In addition, Skylight shows the 18 months of a vessel's history. We're also syncing up with a couple of our partners, Global Fishing Watch, C4ADS Triton, if you haven't heard about them. C4ADS is a nonprofit out of the United States, out of Washington, D.C. They do a lot of information on beneficial ownership. So if you have concerns about who owns a boat, I would encourage you to take a look at Triton. It might be able to be useful to you. In addition, we have SkyTruth's Cerulean, which is an oil spill detection tool that they're using artificial intelligence and synthetic aperture radar to detect oil spills. And that information then comes through, and those events will show up on that vessel's detail. Now, on the AI side, one of the things we're trying to do is we're in the process of developing a chatbot. So as an analyst, you could come into Skylight, go into the chatbot and say to it, how many vessels from Bangladesh entered my EEZ in the last 24 hours? Instead of you having to go and figure out and do all the filtering, the chatbot will do that for you and give you that answer. So we're in that process of developing that tool that hopefully is going to streamline the efforts for analysts. So the obligatory, well, how much data are you doing? Over 100 million AIS messages a day. There's over 200 units or organizations using Skylight. Again, it is at no cost to our partners. Almost 2 terabytes of satellite imagery that we're processing on a daily basis. And around just short of 300,000 vessels are being detected using that satellite imagery over the course of a week. Now, I only have 10 seconds left. And so I will just highlight, then I will be happy to share this with anybody who wants to talk further about it. But there is a recent case study that we had with the government of Panama related to, in this case, it was 16 vessels illegally fishing in one of their offshore MPAs. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, appreciate the opportunity to talk, look forward to talking more, and I'm sorry I didn't get into all of the specifics related to the use of machine learning, computer vision, large language models, but happy to have those conversations during a break or any questions that may come up. Thank you.
Thanks, Gregg, and I'm sure there will be follow-up questions. Sogol, can we have liftoff from you?
Absolutely. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Beautiful. Awesome. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be joining you from Vancouver, British Columbia, and I'm very much delighted to be part of this workshop. I wish I could be there in person, but still very much grateful for this opportunity to connect virtually. My name is Sogol, Ghattan, and I work at the intersection of technology and policy, mostly focusing on how AI and data systems can help improve decision-making and governance in the maritime space. Over the past few years, I've been leading NCIS in developing analytical and decision support platforms for maritime intelligence, and I also run a technology firm focused on responsible AI with a particular emphasis on explainability and human-centered design. And today what I'd like to share is some of my experience applying AI to maritime operations, both in making sense of fragmented and complex data sets and in ensuring these systems are designed and used most responsibly. So in the next 10 minutes or so, we'll look at approaches that keep humans in control when using automated decision-making systems and reflect on the challenges and lessons for using AI responsibly to produce actionable intelligence. Before we talk about solutions here, it's important to understand the reality analysts face every day. I'll try to mention a few here and there in hope that it resonates with some of you folks. Number one is that maritime information today is fragmented. It's spread across multiple sources and often in different formats and with varying reliability. And as a result, analysts frequently have to manually verify and cross-check information, which takes time and naturally introduces risks of error. Analysts often don't have historical context readily available to them, which makes it also difficult to connect the dots or understand long-term patterns. And sometimes the technologies designed to help can actually add complexity rather than clarity. So in short, it can feel like we're drowning in data and just not the kind we need to make fast and informed decisions. So the key question here becomes, how can AI support analysts without adding to the problem? And just to put it another way, how can AI support analysts without replacing them or adding more complexity? The goal here isn't to automate decisions completely. Analysts bring context, judgment, and experience that no AI can replace. What AI can do is make it faster and easier to make sense of large and fragmented data sets. Of course, without forcing analysts to adopt a brand new way of working. And this is where the whole concept of human-in-the-loop approach comes into play. It's not about supervision, it's about collaboration. The system organizes and surfaces patterns, but the analyst stays in control of decisions made. And as you can see here in this diagram, there's a continuous feedback loop. The analyst interprets and provides feedback, and the AI system identifies patterns, and the data sources feed the system. And this loop hopefully helps analysts focus on what matters most, because at the end of the day, AI should make your job easier, not make you learn a new way. So let's talk about the challenges and the role of AI. Now, if we look at the human-in-the-loop approach in operational settings, a practical example is using AI to bring together multiple public and historical data sources in a structured way. This is so the analyst can identify patterns and draw insights while staying fully in control still. The key principle is AI assists by organizing and highlighting relevant information, and the analyst interprets, verifies, and acts. Working with this approach, we built a platform called HAVA at NCIS, which centralizes maritime data and produces a structured report that analysts can work with. Here's what it looks like in practice. On the report, the analyst can quickly see vessel details, ownership information, the vessel enforcement history, links to the sources of the data collected for verification, and of course, geographic overlaps, all the essentials in one place and well set up for analysis. And here's what an actual report will look like. In the report, you will have access to the vessel details, which are the core identifiers and characteristics like name, flag, IMO, MSI, ownership information, who operates or controls the vessel, historical data on the vessel, so any pattern or red flags associated to the vessel, as well as the source links and narratives, which makes every piece of data traceable and contextualized. You can also find the geographic overlap there. So the system here gathers relevant information, brings it all in one place, but the analyst is still at the center, verifying and interpreting and deciding. And when something looks wrong, they can flag it right in the corner on the right-hand side, and that feedback, of course, gets reviewed and validated and used to improve the system over time. So with a report like this, it becomes much easier to move from structured data to real insights, which again brings us back to hopefully a 5 to 10 minute workflow. So in this short workflow, the analyst identifies a vessel of interest, and this is typically triggered by an alert, intelligence tip, or routine monitoring. They get to open the report, they review vessel details, ownership, and past activities, as well as the source of data, and then they verify facts. All key data points link back to registries, news, and official sources. And lastly, they can draw insights and decide action. So centralizing this data in one place on its own reduces a significant amount of time lost to just switching between different systems and different platforms. Keeping in mind that throughout this entire process, the analyst remains in control. AI augments context and pattern recognition, but the judgment is still human. And this is how we believe the system can strengthen both efficiency and decision quality. Having worked with systems like this, a few lessons stand out about applying AI responsibly in this domain. And number one is that building trust in technology is key. The challenge for us isn't the technology itself, it's really building trust in the system. Analysts need to feel confident relying on it. And number two is transparency matters most. Analysts need transparency. They shouldn't be working with black boxes. They must see how insights are generated and be able to verify those sources. Number three is that system design always starts with operations. We don't build technology for its own sake. We start with real operational questions, meaning us as technologists need to focus on what analysts actually need to make decisions, and we create tools that support them in doing so. And honestly, the biggest thing we've learned is that you can't just drop AI into an analyst workflow and expect magic. People need space to learn how to question the outputs, spot when something doesn't add up, and understand where the uncertainty is. Because AI on its own doesn't create intelligence. It's only useful when analysts can look at it, push back on it, and ultimately trust it. And that brings us to what I think is the real challenge here. Not the technology itself, but how we build the right capacity around it. So even with powerful tools, good analysis still depends on good analysts. That means we need people who are trained not just to use AI, but to question it, to spot bias and understand uncertainty and make informed judgment calls. And AI-driven platforms like ours or any other ones that follow that principle help with this by making it easy to verify or challenge outputs, letting analysts share what they find, and building collective knowledge over time. You can think of it like a feedback loop, as you can see here in this diagram. It's analysts, AI, and community knowledge. Each one strengthens one another in their own different ways. So when we think of AI systems for the maritime space, trust isn't something we add at the end. It has to be built from the start. And there are three key principles to this. Number one is transparency. Analysts must see where information comes from. The second one is explainability. Outputs must be understandable to the analyst. And the third one is accountability. Oversight must be embedded in the design. And you can think of it as data model decision with oversight loops at each step of the way. And the goal is very simple to us. Analysts must be able to see, question, and trust the system at every single stage. So I want to end by widening the frame, not just focusing on the analyst, but the environment we create around them. Responsible AI use isn't only about training individuals. It's about creating a culture where questioning technology is expected and supported. We need analysts who become stewards of AI systems, not passive users. People who notice when something doesn't make sense, escalate uncertainty instead of ignoring it, and push for better data and better models. And this is only applicable if the organizations support it. Workflows need to embed oversight from the start, make data quality everyone's responsibility, and ensure feedback loops actually work. And when we think of this as a diagram, because I love that, analysts, AI, data, and oversight, this is not static. It evolves. Analysts improve the system improves the analysis, and the organization becomes more capable. And just as a final emphasis, I promise this is the last one. Responsible AI isn't about replacing expertise. It's about elevating it. And we're not just building tools, we're building analysts. Analysts who are equipped to shape, challenge, and improve AI over time. Because at the end of the day, AI doesn't make decisions, people do. And the smarter the analysts, the smarter the system. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to any particular questions I could answer over email or online.
Fantastic, Sogol, and thank you for reminding us all that the human dimension is critical, and I like your comment that it's not just about training people for AI, but also getting them to question it as well. Our final speaker, Jake Townsend from Pebbly Beach. Jake, over to you.
Thanks, Anthony. Hi, everyone. So with Pebbly Beach, I'm the director responsible for product development. So that means I'm pretty good with AI, but I'm pretty bad at presentations. So one thing I'm going to try to do here is use a lot of AI in my presentation. So I think what we'll find is the presentation itself is going to demonstrate some of the advantages and disadvantages of using AI. And it's important to note that Sogol and I think it was Craig, sorry if I didn't get the name, they were very focused on analytical tools and techniques. My focus when I say AI is going to be on generative AI. So AI that generates text, images, and code. So that means I may not focus so much on analytical processes. Instead, I think one of the themes of the presentation is going to be, particularly for leaders or team leaders, it's the opportunities to give every individual a productivity boost of something like 20%. So a productivity boost from off-the-shelf generative AI. In the spirit of using a lot of AI and in the spirit of trying to define low-risk pilots, I'm going to demonstrate, with the possibility of a failure, I'm going to demonstrate one of the internal tools we have in Pebbly Beach, which is to help us prepare for conferences like this. So to help us prepare for conferences, we have a set of instructions that the AI is supposed to follow. And I'm going to set that up in the background, and then we're going to come back at the end and see if it actually works. What you should be able to see in a second is just a coding tool we have. It's a useful framework to be able to give instructions to an AI agent. So what I had to do is give it a list of attendees. I've given it the workshop program, and then it's going to follow these conference preparation instructions if it does its job well. So I'm going to start that off, and we're going to come back later and see how useful this is for helping me prepare for a conference. In the meantime, I'm going to come and share with you a few more traditional slides. So my focus is on AI adoption. We tend to work with leaders and team leaders on how to adopt AI effectively in line with their missions. The 4 points for the presentation. One is that adoption of generative AI is happening, and it's happening all over the place, and in many cases it's happening without leaders endorsing it, framing it, or governing it. There are huge opportunities in terms of particularly speed, flexibility, and also strategy. And you'll hear me come back to this point quite a few times. There are, however, major security risks and major technology provider risks. So the approach that we tend to adopt, the approach that we tend to help people with, is to identify now low-risk governed pilots for using generative AI. When I say adoption is happening, I'm sure you're all using some of the consumer tools, at least, off the shelf these days. This is a relatively simple chart, but what it's showing is the adoption of 3 technologies over time. If you think that the internet is useful for your job now, and you think that smartphones are useful to do your work, then we can see a trajectory here that suggests that AI might become very, very important and very, very valuable for all kinds of jobs. I know we've seen and heard a lot about that, but it's still worth underlining that this speed of adoption is really, really fast, even by the standards of smartphones, which wasn't exactly slow. And I'm old enough to remember that many organizations, government and companies, the reaction to smartphones was, for some of them, to ban them. You can't use a smartphone for business. You can't use a smartphone for government work. And it took a while before we figured out how to get the most that we can in terms of productivity and autonomy for workers, and also to try to manage some of the risks associated with smartphones. So again, if you remember that, or if you believe my story from 15 years ago, that was the first reaction in a lot of organizations to the adoption of smartphones, or the use of smartphones. And of course, what did workers do? They use their smartphones in the parking lot, or they use their smartphones at their desk, and we had to find ways to bring that into the organization and to use the new technology properly. On this next chart, it looks a bit crazy, but basically we have an upward sloping line that is based on a benchmark for its human tests that the AI is improving on. These are off-the-shelf or consumer products like GPT-4 and GPT-4.1 from OpenAI. And the downward trending line is the costs for achieving that performance. So it's a fairly interesting situation happening over just a couple of years where the performance is going up a lot and the costs are going down. If you're very sharp-eyed, which I was not, what you will see is that the AI generated this slide and it got the colors of the lines and the legend exactly wrong. So in the bottom right, it's actually telling us that the pink line is costs and it's going up, which is wrong. And the other line going down, it's saying is performance. So again, I promised that the presentation might demonstrate some of the risks in using AI, generative AI. This is an example. Takes our human insight to notice that actually it got the legend in this chart completely wrong, or the opposite of what it should be. There are opportunities for speed, flexibility, and strategy. So I know we've all probably played around with the consumer products quite a lot. Within our basic workday, if we can find a way to adopt it in line with our organization's requirements, then obviously there are huge opportunities, particularly for the initial drafting, prototyping, transcribing between different data sources, and transforming according to rules or processes, even with unstructured inputs. The reason I put on here produce code without coding is because once your personnel reach a fairly basic level of understanding about how to prompt, how to guide generative AI, then they can perform prototyping, they can create tools that used to require a major IT project. If you've ever been involved in IT projects in large organizations, you know that they're often painful, terrible processes. But with with generative AI, you can do very low risk IT projects and you can produce prototypes to see how this might work in your organization without going anywhere near the IT department. This last point that I've underlined at the bottom, this is that generative AI, unlike almost all previous software, it can challenge your assumptions, and it can extend your thinking or extend your strategy. So if you have access to a relatively sophisticated product like ChatGPT or similar, you have a safe coach who can answer your questions, who has read all of the Naval and Coast Guard books out there, and that tool can challenge you privately. You don't have to go and make a fool of yourself at the board meeting. You have the world's best read Coast Guard expert who can challenge you. You have the world's best read naval officer who can challenge you. So this is a really cheap, safe, highly effective impact from available tools right now. I can't promise I'm going to demonstrate the world's best example of that, but I am going to try and show or kick off another example. So what I did was, this is our little puppy dog tool for some of our internal use. What I did was I prepared a basic biography of Dr. Anthony Bergin. So what I'm doing is I'm pasting that in. It's giving background on Anthony Bergin, and it's setting a task. So what I'm asking is help Anthony Bergin extend his research agenda. So the task is search the internet, identify Anthony's publishing record, and then propose 3 new topics for the research agenda. I'll kick that off. It'll probably go away and have a little think. So I'll come back to that a little later as well. But the point about this is we think of it as helping us to draft emails. We think of it as helping us to produce funny images, which it can do. But the later generation of generative AI, or the latest generation, is also excellent, cheap, highly effective at helping you refine your strategy and your strategic thinking. Risks. So very obvious risk, but I'm still going to underline it. When you use the most popular tools, your data is almost certainly going to California, Shanghai, or the bottom left is the AI's version of make a scary organized crime picture. So LLMs or large language models like ChatGPT, they do present obvious but still critical data security risks, which is one reason why we need to find ways to do them in-house. We can use the same tools, we can use the same providers if those are the only ones we can access, but we can put barriers around and we can keep clean the data that we share with them. Technology provider risks. The chart that I shared earlier, which showed very fast adoption, if we think back to, or we've heard the stories of the rise of the internet, a massive difference now compared to the rise of the internet is that the last 3 years where generative AI has become very popular or is increasing in popularity, it's not driven by the little companies. It's driven by big tech companies. So the little image on the right-hand side here is a sketch of Google headquarters in 1998. So that's what Google used to be, and Google was a little company that challenged big technology providers and helped to spread the use of the internet. Now, Google is an enormous company pushing generative AI at you. So it's a very different situation, and their interests are not necessarily aligned with yours. One implication is that right now, when products are changing so quickly and prices will keep changing, there's a really big lock-in risk of choosing a technology provider. So it's something that we advise business leaders in particular, is we have to find ways to start adopting AI and using it effectively, but guard against lock-in risk. So the adoption approach that I mentioned, it's to identify low-risk, governed pilot projects. So the aim is that the informal and unsanctioned experimentation that is almost certainly happening at some levels in all of our organizations can become a formal, simple, clear framework. So we're looking for pilot projects that I mean, they align with our mission, obviously. We're looking for gains, but these are relatively low risk. We can put them in a team. We don't necessarily need massive help from the IT department, and we will govern them properly. So we'll set a framework for success. And one of the main things that this does, or forces us to do, which is echoing Sogol a little bit, is that we're trying to build the internal capabilities to use these tools better. So one of the things that happens by adopting a formal framework is we start to focus on what are the resources we need in order to make this pilot have a chance of success. So these are the adoption requirements at any scale for generative AI projects. I'm not necessarily, well, no, I'm not going to read out everything on the slide, but select the use cases and educate your team. So we're going to adopt a new technology, but it's also a new technology or a pilot project that requires us to operate a little differently, potentially, and certainly requires our personnel to understand how to make the most out of it. So now we're going to go back and see whether any of my experiments worked. So Anthony, I can't guarantee you're going to get good advice here. Okay, so let's see if it's achieved. Here's a current view of Dr. Anthony Bergin's recent publishing record. So it's found a bunch of stuff that Anthony has written. It's offering this, which is his links, recent publications. And then it's suggesting the following three for you, Anthony. And I'll be interested to get your feedback later. But the point that I was trying to demonstrate here is in about 90 seconds there, so 30 seconds for me to prepare a reasonable prompt, which was his bio and the task. And then I asked it to include how it assessed these options. And it's helping me, if I'm Dr. Anthony Bergin, helping me to get ideas for my research agenda. And let's go back and see whether somebody in your organization doing conference prep would have got any help at all out of the process that I set up. Okay, so it looks like it's made progress. What it's done is created a mini app here for me to be able to do research on the attendees at the conference. Something that obviously we all might have spent time on in the past, but let's go see if it's actually done anything useful with it. I think we're going to consider it a fail. So what we usually use this for is we use it for producing profiles on each of you that when we're going to attend a conference. And then what we do is load up an app that allows us then to prepare for understanding, who do we want to talk to, that kind of purpose. This has been a fail, which hopefully doesn't happen again in this circumstance. So I think I demonstrated pretty well the risks here. I can tell you that this has failed 2 times out of 10. So I'm sorry for the poor demonstration there. Basically what's happened is it's gone and prepared profiles, like for example this one, but it has not successfully created the app. So it searched the internet to find, well in this case Simon Bateman, tried to find a basic bio, but then it hasn't been successful at preparing actual images and the web server itself. So sorry for the fail there. Just to go back to the themes, we do have adoption happening quickly. There are major security and technology provider risks. We should focus on giving all of our personnel a significant productivity bump. And one of the cheapest, most high impact uses of the available generative AI tools right now is to challenge us on assumptions and strategy so that we can all use it for better thinking and safe exploration. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. My lawyers will be in touch with you. I'm not sure. I'm sure it was all open source. Anyway, that was fascinating, Jake. Thank you so much. Look, we've got, Simon, we've got till, what, 20 past? So we've got plenty of time for the to follow up with the 3 experts that we've heard. So, floor is open for questions or comments. Sir, down the front.
My question is regarding once we are using especially the crowdsourced data for the systems, the uncertainty on the data, how it is going to affect the decision making by the man behind the system. So uncertainty of the crowdsourced data and how it is going to affect, because its maximum is the crowdsourced data, whatever we are getting, and then how it is going to affect the total human system while analyzing the threats or whatever may be the case, or the levels of uncertainty, how we are going to resolve those uncertainty, and how we are taking those uncertainty on board and going for the decision. Thank you.
Gregg?
Well, I'll certainly give a first shot at that. I'll reflect back on the comments that were made yesterday about the Intel cycle. And I think that using that methodology, it allows you to get to some of those questions you have about the uncertainty. Because is it reliable? Do we trust it? Has the source been good in the past? How good is the information? Those tools and that methodology helps those analysts be able to deal with uncertainty as it relates to the data.
Sogol or Jake, either of you want to come in on that? No? Okay. Next, David Brewster down the front.
Thanks. I think this question is principally directed at Gregg, but if any of our other speakers want to weigh in on it. One of the big problems that MDA analysts face at the moment is the diversity of different information platforms. How do you see that being overcome, particularly using AI, being able to essentially provide a uniform picture sourced from several different platforms?
Well, I think Jacob might have some insights on that as well when you talk about generative AI. I'll just talk about it from Skylight's approach. I've sat in ops rooms. The last thing I ever want is to make another screen. I mean, we've got enough. So one of the things that Skylight spends a lot of our time and effort on is making our insights available through APIs. So our information shows up in IORIS, our information shows up in CVision. We're working with other partners such that if that's the tool you choose to use, and I'll also say, like, I think it's the government of Brazil has their own national MDA platform. And so they are ingesting Skylight's data into their platform. So you see it where you want to see it, and the insights and the events are available there. I do think there's probably, I mentioned us developing a chatbot, LLM. I think that those type of tools, when you're able to, the prompt that you give to it, and being able to say, like, for things that are open source, like C4ADS's information, or Global Fishing Watch, or SkyTruth's data, being able to prompt the chat to be able to go and look at it. Jacob, I'm completely mincing your world of work. Sorry about that. But to use those tools to be able to then look across those pieces and bring information back to the analysts.
Jake, do you want to, I know you're not a maritime person per se, but the general...
That's right. Gregg was inviting me to mince his domain. No, I'm joking. Look, mine's much more at the individual training level. So in a situation like that, if you can be specific to a generative AI tool on how you assess the quality of different sources, then you will get back much better organized, a much better organized response. So what I mean by that is, off the top of my head, the prompt might include, I want you to go to these 4 websites and track or download the following categories of information. Assess the categories based on 3 criteria: trustworthiness, track record, and level of detail. Output for me a table that shows how you assess those different, the different sources of information. You know, a pattern like that. It's just like if you're supervising a new staff member. You know, you don't just tell them, "Oh, go find me some information from the 4 websites." Instead, you have to tell them how you want it, how it would be done usually, and the quality or standard that you expect. And then you will find that the generative AI, it tends to perform much better.
Thanks, Jake. Sogol, did you want to add anything or comment?
Not really. I mostly just kind of echo Jacob in that sense. But one of the main issues that you will be dealing with using those generative AI tools will be that it will have trouble making those judgment calls throughout, and that's the source of my worry for the most part, which I'm a big advocate for just collecting the information and not necessarily asking the system to provide any kind of insights or judgment calls in that sense. So that's the only thing that I would add.
Thank you. Over here on my left, yes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Commander Rahim. My question is for Ms. Ghattan and Mr. Townsend. So far you have discussed all about the present uses of AI to generate the MDA or to generate other response or get an answer. And also you talked the AI which will be used especially by Gregg for the non-conventional maritime threat like piracy and other things. So my question is actually beyond the non-conventional threat and beyond the future time. See, as a young naval practitioner, those who we are here, we grew up by seeing Terminator franchise movies. We grew up by seeing The Matrix, iRobot, those sort of movies where AI is taking over the policy making or decision making from the humankind. So I'm talking about in future as the AI is proliferated day by day and it's becoming very popular, especially for the decision makers, because it's giving the tools to take the decision very quickly and meticulously, even sometimes without thinking. So with the advantage of satellite-based surveillance and with the AI for quick analysis, the battleground in present and also in future, it's going to be congested, contested, and very competitive. So in this scenario, do you think that AI in future may push the military policy makers from previous defensive policy like no first use policy to something like offensive policy like use it or lose it policy? Thank you.
Maybe you could just nutshell the question so everyone...
That sounds more like you, Sogol, is it?
I'm thinking. I'm thinking.
I'll gladly defer to the other 2 speakers. It's a very complex question. I will say, and I think you've heard all 3 of us talk about this, about the need for, whether it be an analyst or a policymaker, decision maker, whatever you want to call them, you still have to have some level of understanding about what decision you're making, right? I don't think you're going to get to a situation, and I certainly can tell you from Skylight's perspective, I would never encourage someone to take a Skylight event and say, well, that's the truth, right? Go look at the AIS tracks. Go look at the image. Go look at the vessel's history. Go look at various different sources to help you verify that what you're seeing is correct. And then that is, that's always my recommendations to analysts. What we're going to do is we're going to take all that big data and we're going to identify events of interest, but you need to look at those events. And so I hope it doesn't lead to this situation where someone says, well, Skylight said this vessel was engaged in fishing, so thus they must be engaged in fishing. I hope we don't get there, because that's a step too far in my opinion.
Thanks, Greg. Who was it? Jake you were asking, or I think it was. Did you have any?
Obviously it's a very huge question. So I mean, from one point of view, if for the technology to work at all, then you cannot get with this. I'm talking about large language models and other kinds of generative AI at the moment. You cannot eliminate that kind of risk. So you can, and there are models that are designed where they will produce that kind of guidance. But I would also point out, this is not, so I'm worried about that a little bit as well. But I'd also point out that, 1960s, you had sort of spreadsheets and computers that were used then as the justification for all kinds of terrible policies. You've seen that every decade. So it's still the case that the technology can cut either way. So it's the institutional safeguards and the individual training around it. We don't really ask for explainable Microsoft Excel, but we still end up seeing decisions justified on your Excel calculations to fire thousands of people. It's a corporate policy or it's an ethical decision. It's not an Excel or a generative AI decision.
Thank you. Thanks, Jake. Sogol, did you want to add any comment or?
Not much to add to that, but I also always have this worry, and I think technology, like it or not, technology is taking over. That's my belief, and I think we need to get ready for it. Governments need to get ready for it. We do need regulatory frameworks in place, and that's about it on my end.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Lieutenant Commander Rohit, Ops Officer, IFC Iowa. I would like to ask two tactical questions as an operation officer. Have you monitored any cases of AI spoofing, any case studies on that? And further, we had monitored a trend in few areas wherein the buoys were used by fishing vessels to give away their positions, and thereafter there was an RV of bigger vessels for transshipment transfer. So if the answer is yes, then we may discuss one or two cases for benefit of all. Thank you.
So the question is AIS spoofing. Is that the?
Yes, AI spoofing and buoys being used by fishing vessels to give away their positions, and thereafter RV with the bigger vessels to transfer their catch.
Okay, I'll ask Gregg, and then I might ask Sogol whether that spoofing issue has come up in any of her investigations. Okay, Gregg?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of information about AIS spoofing out there. And we certainly see it within Skylight's platform. We do the best we can to try to review those incidents and where they're within the community. If there's a specific vessel, specific NMSI, those type of pieces, and trying to not have those incidences show up within the platform. As for the use of buoys for marking of fishing vessels, I am no expert on some of the telecommunications provisions related to the use of AIS. However, as I understand it, at least in some countries and under some international regimes, that those buoys are not supposed to be marked with AIS. And so there is this issue of, we have the position information, can you determine what it is, and then how do you leverage that information for, whether that be that a vessel is engaged in fishing or whatever that tool is that's associated with it. I think that there is information there that can be useful to an ops center, right? If I think a buoy, and I'll use Sri Lanka as an example, I think their fisheries department actually, if vessels are going to use AIS on their buoys, there's a naming convention. So you should see a specific name associated with that buoy. Well, that's a very valuable piece of information for you at an ops center. So if I see an AIS track show up in an area, and I can tell that that is, at least in theory, a buoy, and let's say it's in a no-take area, that's useful. That's useful to you. So I would hope that you would use that in that context, but also recognizing that those Class B units, low power, there's all kinds of constraints associated with looking at that information. So I don't know, I hope I'm answering your question, but if not, I'm happy to talk with you during a coffee break.
Sogol, did you want to, in any of your operational investigations, is this issue arisen?
Yeah, I have seen a couple of instances within the reports, but something to note is that our platform collects publicly available information. So anything that has been publicly shared by either enforcement agents or in public reports and whatnot, that gets gathered in one place. I have seen that with a few instances. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm not sure if I am answering the question. Was the question whether that instance happened? If that is the question, yes, I have seen it in the past.
Okay, thank you. Yes, over here on my left again.
Good morning, I'm Captain Savan from the National Maritime Foundation, New Delhi. My question is that as far as illegal fishing, or including IUU fishing is concerned, the coastal states whose jurisdiction extends up to the EEZ, they will normally take care of their EEZ, put up surveillance, monitor AIS, coastal, deploy law enforcement, etc. The problem is beyond the EEZ, that is areas which are beyond national jurisdiction but within some jurisdiction of regional fisheries management organizations. So are you partnering with them and are you providing any inputs to them? Secondly, as per IMO, vessels less than 500 gross tonnage or across the board, or 300 gross tonnage, on international voyages, they are not mandated to carry AIS. Now, this is a huge vessel. For example, it is roughly around 100 feet to by 30 feet vessel, which is a big fishing vessel if you think of it. So they will normally not, they are not mandated to carry AIS. Now, your presentation, Skylight, and even I would, if I can put the question to Hava also, Ms. Sogol, that your track generation and your first queuing is because of AIS. You look at AIS, and if the AIS goes dark, then you put VIIRS or maybe SAR or other imagery. And as far as track generation or vessel report generation is concerned, these fishing vessels will be registered in national registries, but I don't think that their registries are as open as are those of merchant shipping vessels. So how do you generate tracks for these fishing vessels?
To hit your first question about work with regional fisheries management organizations, absolutely. We also work with the IUCN on the development of BB&J provisions, and then from my perspective, the high seas, we're never going to have enough ships. We're never going to have enough planes. We're not going to have enough drones. There's no real functional way for us to monitor what's going on in the high seas or those waters beyond national jurisdiction without the use of some type of technology. Now, how we get to yes on that, there's a variety of different ways to do it. We're using the information that we have freely available to us, right? Or that we can shouldn't say freely available to us. We're using the information that we can get our hands on. That information is AIS, right? A lot of countries also have their own vessel monitoring systems and internally. So again, I come back to, from Skylight's perspective, we see an incident where a vessel has chosen to put AIS on for whatever reason. Could be that insurance, it helps them with their insurance rates. It could be that a vessel owner wants to know where his vessel is. There's a lot of reasons. Or perhaps you work in a busy shipping way and you just don't want to get run over. Because AIS is about not having vessels run into each other, right? No going bump in the middle of the night. So that information is what's available to us. We try to make our events available. So for example, in Panama, where they are monitoring their distant water fishing fleet, they're bringing in Skylight data, and they're looking at Skylight data in comparison to what they have from their VMS system, in comparison to what they have from their catch documentation system, consistent with any transshipment reports that have been brought in. That information then gets fused at that center to make a decision. So to that piece of the, hopefully that answers your question, sir. And yes, we're having those conversations, but Skylight is a piece. It is not the whole solution.
I'd just add to your question, Captain, that as you'd know, there's an international push by the UN to have 30% of the world's oceans as marine protected areas by 2030. So that's going to, boost the requirement along the lines that you've asked. Further, yes, down here, the front.
Good morning, sir. Thank you very much for wonderful 3 presentations. I'm Commander Deyanga, the Sri Lankan ILO at the IFCIOR. My question will be directed to Mr. Gregg on Skylight. Your third, I understand Skylight is working on basically on 7 events. My question is on the third event, which is the fishing, trawling, bottom trawling. You have a generic, it's all over the world, the algorithm, it's similar. But if you take the geographies, the localities, if you, for an example, since I'm from Sri Lanka, the north of Sri Lanka, it's pair trawling, bottom trawling. It's kind of quite different to the other geographies. So if the countries are ready to give you the algorithm, the mathematic model for you to incorporate so that the data extracted through a Skylight is specific, it's not generic. So would you be able to do that? And thank you.
So thank you for the question. And this is one of the things I didn't really have a chance to get into, is how do you build out the model? So for us to build out that fishing activity model, which is a machine learning, right? So we're teaching the machine to look for a certain activity. That process of developing that model was, I think 6-9 months with, I think it was around 15-20 experts from around the globe looking at AIS pictures and saying this is fishing activity, this is not fishing activity. So that is how we built the model out. So it was not one person. It was using those subject matter experts to look at it and then comparing those across between the subject matter experts so that people were having that kind of double look at it. But to the extent your question about, if you have specific vessel activity profiles that could help inform the models, absolutely love to have it. I will not, our team that develops that model would probably kick me in the shin if I said that they could incorporate it. But what I will say is we're happy to receive it. We're happy to see whether or not it is something that could be used to strengthen the model.
Sogol, did you want to come in at all on that?
I think I'm okay. Thank you.
No problems. Okay, we've got time for a couple more. So, on my right, yep.
Good morning, Lieutenant Commander Michael Bruce, Australian Navy, but working in Singapore Information Fusion Centre. My question, I guess, is predominantly for Jake, and it's not a maritime domain one, so hopefully it's okay. As military and, I guess, other government security practitioners, there's a lot of reluctance into incorporating AI into our workflow, both security, but also, I guess, corporate hierarchical slowness. And I was wondering if you had any insights or suggestions as to how we can better do that, mitigate some risks and convince the potentially some more conservative parts of the organization to be able to use these tools in some effective manner.
Over to you, Jake.
No silver bullets, but I think 2 places to start would be one, that strategy level that I just talked about. So I don't mean strategy like tell me Australia's military strategy for the eastern seaboard. I don't mean like that, but I mean for anybody at any level. If you are trained and there are some basic safeguards around whichever system or model you adopt, you can get really significant gains in people's planning about their key topics, sequencing whatever those objectives are that they have, and all of that can be done with each person working purely with their own screen. And if And if you're not going to tell someone over the phone secrets of your national security strategy or whatever you're working on, then you also don't type it into the computer for the LLM. You find ways to get the best you can from that tool without breaching security. This is even before we get to bringing an LLM completely in-house, right? And then being able to control almost everything around it. So that is, it's like giving someone a smartphone so that they can check their calendar and coordinate meetings better. It's an individually advantageous technology for almost every person in an organization. The other point might be, you operate in military, you operate in often in high security information environments, and then on the flip side, there's lots of things that you do that are not high security. So there's lots of tasks that you're doing where there is less need for security. You're drafting some emails on insecure networks. You're preparing conference participation notes that contain nothing that's classified. So there are loads of tasks that you're doing, which anyway you do over insecure networks or unclassified networks. And there's lots and lots of that. I don't know if you use the term, but there's lots and lots of that grunt work that is not sensitive. So that would be places to start where even the top brass might understand that there's, that's not a security risk there. That's conference planning where there's no security classification. And some kind of learning and professional pride forces me to show you that the tool did work and I screwed it up. So this is what it found on Michael Booth that it could share with me while you were talking, Michael. This is an example, right? So that was the 12 minutes while I was speaking, or 15 minutes while I was speaking, to prepare a conference participation website. Not high security, nothing to be scared about in terms of information protection. I don't know if that helps at all, Michael, but it's changing the mindset perhaps from, big IT project, we're going to need the IT department and we're going to start thinking about the classification levels, versus where's a team or where's a consistent set of tasks for a team that are not classified? Well, let's learn in that situation. I hope that helped.
Thanks, Jake. Sogol, you must work with Canadian maritime agencies. Maybe you could offer some thoughts to Michael.
Yeah, so one thing I would definitely, and this is for the most part, again, repeating what Jake said in other words, I think the number one step with an organizational level would be making sure that there are proper workshops in place for everyone on the team to be acquainted with the concepts. And in those workshops, it can be very much helpful to create those kind of safeguards and do this level by level. And as to Jake's point, it can start very broad. It can be defining a particular set of tasks that can be automated, and removing those safeguards line by line as you go, and as you create that trust and accountability. So I think that in our case helped a lot if you are looking to build up that trust within the team and at the organizational level especially.
Thank you, Sogol. I'm going to draw it to a close now. If I may, just one editorial on AI, and it's a topic we haven't actually considered so far, but and that's subsea cables, because what enables the absolutely massive data transfers for training and running AI systems, of course, are subsea cables, and they're vulnerable. So I guess the thought that I would throw in here is that AI infrastructure is also a maritime challenge, okay? It's a maritime challenge of how to protect those subsea systems. Look, I think I've been privileged actually to listen to these three presentations. I think they were extraordinary, and I think each of our speakers have helped us sort of understand how, if AI is developed in the right way, it can assist not just MDA but also the whole business operations of our organisations. So could you join me in thanking our three speakers? Thank you, virtual people. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake and Sogol, and thank you, Anthony and Greg. We now move into morning tea, where I'd like you back seated by 10:40, please, for the case study from the Indian IFC IOR. Thank you.